Hey everybody, welcome to Missing Links with John, Brock, and myself, Stephen King, where we discuss what's missing in Web3 architecture. So this week, NFTs. For feedback, please go to missinglinks.fm, send us an email, give us some feedback on what we discuss and what you'd like us to cover next week. All right, let's get into it. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Missing Links with John, Brock, and myself, Stephen. Missing Links, we talk about some missing infrastructure that exists in Web3 and blockchain. How are you guys doing today?
Pretty good.
Doing good.
So John and Brock just came out to Telluride, and we had a wonderful week playing with animals and going for hikes and doing all sorts of fun stuff, flying drones. But you guys made it back safely, it looks like.
Yep.
So I think it's worth saying this, that Brock and I did how many miles was it?
It's like just north of 20.
It felt a lot more than that. But we did about 20 miles. So you walk out my front door. It was Brock's idea. Let's walk out your front door and summit Mount Sneffels, which is 14,150 feet, I think. And So we left at about 11 o'clock at night. We summited, what would you say, like 10 o'clock?
Yeah, they're about 10 a.m. Yeah.
All right. So we summited at about 10 o'clock. And then we walked back down. We were supposed to get picked up in Uray, and my wife decided she didn't want to come pick us up. So we had to go I think we went probably an extra 4 miles just because of that. But she did eventually get us, and we made it back, even though we saw a mountain lion and a pack of wolves or coyotes or whatever they were. Yep. But we lived to fight another day.
That was good. It's a good adventure.
Anyway. All right. So this week, NFTs. It'll be a good balance, and so Brock loves NFTs. I'm not a big fan of NFTs. And John, where do you stand?
So I think I'm in the middle. I think I might be a kind of the mitigator here, but I see purpose in them. I see a good use for them, but I could see how it could just be abused and used in ways that really don't make sense. But we can get into that in a little bit. I think we should. Brock, you love your NFTs. Can you explain what an NFT is?
Please.
Yeah. So a lot of people think that an NFT is a JPEG online. That is not true. NFT stands for Non-Fungible Token. So the idea here is an NFT contract is a contract on chain, and it just tracks owners of a token ID. So John, you might own token number 1. I could own token number 2. Stephen could own token number 3. Each one of those is unique because the ID is unique. So this is different than like a normal like cryptocurrency token where you own a volume of that token. So I could have 100 USDC. Somebody else should have 500 USDC, and the USDC that I own is indistinguishable from somebody else's. You're just owning the volume of it. So with NFTs, the non-fungible part means that each token is unique. So you can own an individual thing. And so the way they've gotten used more recently is as proof of ownership of a digital asset, often an image. So each one of those token IDs to point to an image off-chain, on-chain, wherever it might be. And so the NFT is your proof of ownership of that.
That was pretty good.
Yeah.
So John, if it points to something, where's the JPEG stored?
So it could be stored anywhere. Most people store it in IPFS, and it's kind of the de facto. That in what is it, Pinata? Not Pinata. I think that. Yeah, is that the right one? I think there's another one.
Pinata is a service to help you store it on IPFS.
Okay, so
Arweave is the other storage option.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, most people put it on IPFS. I have not seen. I think I've seen only one case where it was stored on like a Google CDN or something like that, but very rare. They try to keep it all as decentralized as possible, data included.
So kind of off tangent, but I wish I had the stat in front of me. But there's a ridiculous amount of I think it's classified as events happening on IPFS way more than I thought. So I guess a lot of people are using it, which is good. But okay, so we've got basically a hash that points to, or an ID that points to ownership. Cool. I agree with you that this last craze was more JPEG related, so I wasn't really keen on participating in that. But there's some cool things that you can do in the real world, and it does show proof of ownership. I would imagine that real estate will one day go this way in terms of just title and things like that. So Brock, explain, aren't there different standards? I think there's two, right? And do you know the difference, or John, do you know the difference between the two?
Yeah, so there's two big ones. So in the world of contracts, there's standards specifically in Ethereum. There's these ERCs, they call them. So there's ERC 20, that's your standard token contract, and then there's ERC 721, and that's kind of now the de facto standard for NFTs. And so there's variations on that, like ERC 721A, which is more gas optimized. But the other big bucket is ERC 1155. So the difference between 721 and 1155 is 721 is a single NFT contract. 1155 allows you to have multiple NFTs in a single contract. So it gets into the world of like batch NFT generation, and even like a single project having multiple different NFTs.
So go ahead, John. Sorry.
I was going to say, so theoretically, if you needed to, let's just say, like, to kind of give like a use case, if you were doing a one-off, like, let's just say land could be represented, it could be represented as a 721, where if you were hosting like let's just say you're hosting a conference or like a playoff game, like some football game, you could use the 5511 to kind of generate a single contract that would embody all the type of NFTs for that event, that each person would get a different ID, correct?
Yeah, so like taking the sport event, like you might have a season represented as an 1155 contract. And so maybe there's a type of NFT within there where you can buy a season ticket, and there's another type where it's specific to an individual game. And so you can kind of wrap all that logic in one contract.
So let me ask you this question. Why have two? Is it just to optimize on gas or different features?
Different features, gas optimization. The other thing with 1155 is you can have, I almost want to say like pseudo fungible tokens. So there's this idea of you can have more than one of the same thing, but you can also have different things within it. So it just gives you more variety. And so like going back to the sports example, you could have just like general overflow tickets that aren't tied to a specific seat. And those overflow tickets are all the same. You're just buying one. And so that's represented as an NFT, but it's those are fungible, but within the broader collection, it's still an NFT. It's non-fungible.
I see. So it's like if there's like 1,000 $10 tickets, you'll have 1,000, representations of that. They're all the same, but once you hit that cap, it's done.
Yeah. Yeah. 1155 is essentially a interesting mix of 721 NFTs and 20, which is like your standard token. It plays on a lot of logic, and gives you a lot more flexibility, which most projects just don't need. So that's where the vast majority of NFT projects are 721s.
What about tokenizing NFTs? So then I would be a little bit more interested, right? Because there's no liquidity with, there is liquidity with NFTs, these JPEGs, but it's much more fun. I mean, 2017, 2018 tokens it was a liquid thing that you could actually trade. JPEGs don't really have that much of a use. If you can trade them, cool, but they're not as liquid. So, but if you could fractionalize the NFT either in the real world or in the digital world, now you're talking. Now it seems a little bit more interesting. Which part or which is that been proposed? I know it's been proposed, but is that been passed, or what's going on with that?
As far as I know, that's not a standard in itself. There's a lot of interesting use cases on top of NFTs, and people span the 721 standard pretty extensively. like kind of the range stems from, you could have artwork that is fractionalized, and so each piece of that artwork is its own like individual NFT, or you can have the NFT itself be put into, say, something like a DAO, and there's joint ownership in the DAO, and so thereby you're kind of fractionalizing ownership of the underlying asset. But there's no standard for that as far as I know.
So there's an art they're not art there's a company that basically they do art. They sell art, but they sell fractional pieces of art in the real world. So you can own like 10% of a Picasso if you want. Now they're not blockchain, but I would imagine that they will go blockchain. They advertise actually on different podcasts, and I just can't think of the name off the top of my head, but they just raised a bunch of money. So that's like a great use case of like, hey, if you want to get into this particular market and the barrier to entry is pretty high, well, then that lowers the bar and allows regular people to get in. So that's kind of cool. What other? I know Kevin Rose did like these some kind of birds, and Brock, you may have been at the conference that he did this at, where it was an admission to a party. Um, what other use cases are you guys excited about, or where do you see this going now that there's a downturn in the market? Now things are being built. Are you seeing anything cool or anything that you're following that is better than JPEGs?
So there's a. Are you talking more about the technology itself or use cases? Because I had a few use cases I was thinking about.
Yeah, either way, man. I
Mhm.
am open to both.
So as Brock covered, we were talking about sporting events and stuff like that. I think that's huge, especially we all hate when we are trying to get tickets to something and there's like scalpers and stuff and people. So I think that's like very cool. I think the two biggest places, especially in today's age, will be high fashion, gaming, and certain types of natural like resources. Like I know there was a project many years back that what they did was they worked with different restaurants in the United States, sushi restaurants, to actually. Now, again, we could call this overkill, but the wild fish that they caught, they assigned an NFT through the supply chain, so that when you were given the sushi, you knew exactly the location, the depth, everything about that fish, and it gave you more clarity and a better respect for it, which that again, that goes to more high end clientele. But I think for a lot of the big issues that certain brands have, especially in the textile industry, it's knockoff. So if they can tie certain types of things with the NFT, and that's your proof of ownership and proof that it's real, I think that I think is huge. But again, that only plays into a very small part of the market. I think the biggest thing will be gaming, like certain type of rewards with gaming, because there's a lot of cheaters in gaming. There's a lot of gaming itself is not maybe the gaming we're used to. It's now so competitive, and it creates some really interesting communities. So I think having an NFT platform built into certain games, I think it'd be really cool because it kind of legitimizes certain people's skills.
Yeah, yeah. Gaming definitely. Wine would be another big one.
Yep. Yep.
I know there's probably a number of people working on that. That's hard when you get into the physical world. Actually, Brock and I were playing around with the idea of putting together like this simple app at one point about just like the hay and the whole process. We were going to sell meat, and you have to be USDA approved in the United States to sell beef. So when we process a cow, we get I don't know, thousand pounds, 800 pounds worth of meat. And so we said, well, why don't we just kind of track where we get the hay and sort of the life cycle of both the animal and its food, and then people would be able to kind of see that more so in like image format, but it would be backed up. So I don't know. We're not at the point as a society where people are going to go check something like that. But I've seen since then a bunch of different companies spring up that are focused on that, which is pretty cool. So yeah, I think gaming is for sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, like along those lines, there's this new term kind of being tossed around right now called physical, or it's like physical digital mix. So they're using like NFTs to cross the in real life and digital boundary to offer shopping experiences, logistics, kind of get to a lot of what we're talking about.
So wait, hold on. I'm gonna have to look up the term because it's called what? Say it again. I just want to hear you say it again.
Phygital. I've never actually heard it pronounced. I just see it written. I think it's
Physical.
Phygigal. So it's like the first part of physical, the last part of digital.
So they chose like the hardest word you could possibly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
So give me some examples of that. I mean, like, are you saying like the wine use case and things like that, or clothes, or what?
It could be wine. Like I haven't necessarily seen this, but like a clothing store would be a really logical example. So you could have like your hats are a type of NFT, your socks are an NFT, your shoes are an NFT, and like purchasing those can then be done on chain as part of like an e-commerce play, but you're purchasing real physical assets.
And what's that do? It authenticity or what? It gets your size right, so you can take that to like I can go from like Reebok to Nike, and it's got all my measurements, or it's just authenticity.
It's more so just bringing like e-commerce and physical goods into the Web3 space. So it's less about your own personal identity and more just participating in the Web3 ecosystem. So it like gives you a really seamless way to say purchase a pair of shoes using crypto on chain. You don't have to say who you are. You don't have to swipe a credit card. And it like gives you a really clean way to like track those orders, et cetera, et cetera.
So I'm just trying. What would be the point of what's the NFT play in that? Like, what is that doing? Because you could just buy a pair of shoes. I don't follow. I'm sure maybe you said it and I missed it, but why does it need to be an NFT, or what's the value?
I'm not explaining it super well. It's a little abstract, but the idea is that what you're purchasing, that proof of ownership is the NFT, and the NFT points to a pair of shoes in this case.
Okay, got it. Okay, that makes sense.
So that's where like the on-chain piece is just the proof of ownership, and what it points to could be something physical, it could be something digital, it could be all sorts of different things.
Yeah, that makes sense. Actually, I wish that like I booked a flight, I had to cancel it. I got a credit, and now I'm booking another flight. I was on the phone for like 3.5 hours. I wish that could be an NFT. I wish I could just like show that I have this ownership credit and sort of transfer it towards a new flight. And that may be a little bit more complex, but if we can get to that world, and actually now that I say that, I see what you're saying with your example, because it's like a receipt.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like if the seat on the plane was an NFT itself, and you can purchase that NFT or sell it back to the company or trade it for a different seat, like that's where you start to get into those economics.
Like theoretical. Though you put yourself in a very tricky spot because there's so much regulation about at least airline seats, like how you sell them and stuff. And I don't think you just want to be trading them over to people. But yeah.
Well, what about music then? We got tickets to the Telluride Bluegrass Festival. The tickets didn't arrive here in time. They were being shipped from Chicago, John. Didn't make it. And but we bought them. That was the thing. So we bought these tickets, but we didn't have them physically. And I couldn't believe you couldn't just print anything out. Yep. You couldn't do that. But if we could have just had this NFT that was transferred over to us, that would have been amazing. We would have been able to go to the show.
Yeah, I mean that's the beauty of it. So like, I went to NFT NYC, and so like some of the parties and the conferences, you had to show proof of ownership of an NFT to like get in. So as your access. So you could theoretically buy it 30 seconds before you go in, while you're in line, instantly transfers on purchase, show your QR code, hey, I own this, and then you're in.
It would be cool too if like you could NFTize like your portfolio and sell it like a bulk portfolio, to somebody else rather than like individual stocks or things like that.
So like how they broke up mortgages during 2008 and like leading up to that, just break up everything, sell it as a new product.
Yeah. It's a brave new world, and there's a lot of derivatives that you can do. So okay, cool. So what's an NFT? We got that. We got some digital use cases. We've got some physical use cases, but it's still, we're all in the space. You guys maybe are a little bit more underground than me. What's actually being built? Where's the actual? Are we still pretty early because we're just in the bear market? So So real companies are just being formed. And I don't mean that other companies that have already launched aren't real. I just mean, do you guys see anything that's either interesting or worth paying attention to now?
The industry is definitely young. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very young.
Go ahead, John.
I was going to say, the more I hear about is, so this is like to Brock's point, the industry is young and I think slightly naive. What I see is less projects, but stories of people that have taken advantage of the NFT craze and used it to kind of make themselves rich, but also has brought a lot of attention to money laundering. And I think this goes back especially to our talk from last week on Tornado Cash. But they would buy, they would use a wallet to make an NFT to then buy it back and then use that to then call it an asset, even though I don't think you can technically call it an asset. So yeah, most of the NFT stuff I've seen are just one-off NFTs that I feel have just been used to move money or say you bought it. So that's the only things I've seen, in my opinion.
Yeah, there's a level of that. I think a lot of the industry is focused on the art and the community building. So it's like very grassroots efforts in that way. I think that the next big phase of NFTs will probably be gaming, metaverse, and if anybody can break into royalties. So using an NFT to represent a piece of music or a video and being able to collect royalties by like, viewing that piece of art, that'll be a huge unlock.
So for ERC20, I would say the main breakthrough during the down market and coming back out of it was maybe stable coins, right? Like DAI was released, but that's programmatic. And so you've got like USDC, and it wasn't like a big boom, but it was, and Tether's been around for a while too. But like when USDC came out, that was a big step in the right direction. And so it's slowly being regulated. And so it'll be interesting to see what the use case is, if it's the same type of deal with NFTs coming out of this, if it's like a slow progression of something that's going to be kind of regulated at first, like mortgages or title or something like that, or if it'll be, I don't know that it's going to be art. I think there's people that are interested in art, but I don't know that there's enough people interested in a rock that's worth $1.5 million that's going to kind of move this sector forward. Um, do you guys have any? You guys have any thoughts on that, or
like from the art angle, NFTs definitely give the ability for artists to find new ways to monetize their work. So it's huge for the artists themselves. But I agree. I don't know how large of a market there is for like art seekers.
Most people can't even contribute to that market. When we think about like the art market, we're thinking like very high end pieces. So I think this would be great for like street artists, like a way for them to kind of, I don't want to say legitimize them, but kind of get traction and value and use the NFTs as a way to demonstrate value over time.
There's some artists out there right now that are like remaining anonymous, but they're able to like collect proceeds from their artwork, even though they're very underground. They're doing 1-for-1 pieces, but they're still able to monetize it, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, you kind of get like a 10% every time it's sold. That I do think is like, that's a blessing and a curse. I think that's awesome if you're the owner of it, because you've got this annuity forever. And but it's also going to inflate prices over time. But John, I have a question for you. So you're getting your pilot's license, and you're really into flying. So I know that that's a heavily regulated industry, but where do you see kind of just this tech or just kind of any aspect of anything we've talked about? I meant to ask you that while we were here, but I know there's a lot of opportunity in not just commercial but private. Do you see anything or any use cases either that you're interested in or that you can see blossoming or coming out in the next couple of years?
So I definitely think this technology could be used in the aviation industry. Now, keep in mind, it is very regulated, like heavily regulated, which is good. It's for safety. I would think it would be a cool, I see it as a cool implementation to deal with a lot of kind of the licensing rules, like have pilots licensing rule represented as like one of those 1155 NFTs where each case represents a classification or a certification you have. So like multi-engine, IFR, VFR, like all the different certifications you need to fly. That would be cool because it would give an easy way of auditing because everything is still, there's a lot of paper trails. Like, and when you get your pilot's license, it's not like a card you have, it's a piece of paper, pretty much validating you can fly. And there are some central databases that allow you, government agencies, to know what you're qualified for. But like anything else, it doesn't seem that efficient. I think it would be cool to have it represented as like one of those NFTs. I think the biggest issue would be that the clientele or the people using it tend to be an older generation, and they have learned a certain way of doing things, especially when it comes to flying. As we have more automation in planes, it gets harder to manage that because it's just it's a cognitive overload pretty much. So I think it's cool, but the question is how it would be implemented. I think at the like low end, non-commercial, like hobbyist kind of thing, I think it would be cool, especially to represent collectors' planes, because there's a lot of cool planes like in Oshkosh when they have air shows. Like people like to collect things, and planes are one of them. So I think that would be a really cool. Like besides having the plane, you kind of have a history of the plane, and that's another big thing. Log books. As of today, logbooks are mostly are paper and digital. Pretty much, for those who don't know, a logbook is pretty much an explanation of everything that's been done to the plane. If you ever buy a plane or sell a plane, if you do not have that logbook, you can assume that it's just scrap metal because you don't know how the engines perform, all those things.
It's like Carfax for planes? Is that
in a way, yeah? And
like?
you have to have it because God forbid there's a plane crash. The logbook gives the investigators details of what the plane's gone through, recovery, damage, repairs, maintenance, engine rebuilds, all that. And there have been cases in the past where logbooks were changed after the fact to, prevent a plane from being grounded or this or that, which then led to it. So I think this would be an interesting use case, not just for their NFT, but kind of a chain of immutable data that will allow people to trust the vehicle they're going on.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, being able to source the materials too. I mean, you don't know what you're working with, right? It's like that Jeep we worked on that it says it's metal, but
it was. And for the record, that Jeep was wired completely wrong.
Yeah, for those that are listening, we bought a mini golf cart Jeep from China, and Brock and I put it together, and then John and Brock rewired lithium-ion batteries in it. And John, you guys did a really good job because I've been driving it.
It's
and
fast.
Other than the bouncing around like crazy, which we got to figure out, it's a heck of a lot faster.
It's fun.
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, this was a good conversation. I still am not a huge fan of NFTs, but Brock, I can tell how enthusiastic you are, so I'm somewhat enthusiastic that I'll get there as things continue to develop. So
this episode of the podcast will be an NFT in the future.
The ownership of this podcast.
Oh yeah, that was a good idea actually. And you know what? My first million, these two guys, Sam Parr and I forget the other guy's name. Basically, what they did was it's pretty smart. They said they sold an NFT and it was like 15 minutes on their show, but you can come on anytime. So like if the podcast continues to get listeners, it increases in value. So whoever bought that can flip it. That's awesome. I love that kind of stuff. So yeah,
totally.
It's pretty neat. Cool. Well, if you have feedback, email us. We don't check it, but it's still a good thing to do. hello@missinglinks.fm or leave comments on YouTube. Until next week, adios.